through it methodically. We're going to encourage discussion. There's really, the outcome for tonight is just that there is good discussion, and we're going to push on a few of the areas where things could be handled in one or two different ways, just to explore what has been done, what in Summerland, what could be done, what might be done in other municipalities on these types of developments. And then following tonight's workshop, we will have a formal report together with summarizing together with recommendations for the next council meeting. So the intent tonight isn't to come up with any necessarily have a debate to come to a final idea. It's to have an open discussion. I would really encourage council to realize that we haven't had too many of these conversations in regards to developments on what aspects of a development are covered under development cost charges, what the developer should pay, what the municipality should pay, and that I would encourage you to be thinking about this discussion with your hats off on how you may particularly feel towards this particular application, and think about taking the principles that you are thinking on this discussion forward to any other development, one which you may favor or one which you may not favor, because that's the principles of how we should be looking. Everything we're doing is working towards getting some consistency. So a real purpose of this is really to understand the relationship of amenity contributions, DCCs, developer contributions, et cetera. There may still be very real reasons why you may favor or not favor the application. But if the infrastructure is not a piece of it, we need to make that clear, because it will come back up in the future when you're looking at another application, and you would expect that at least the principles would be consistent. So with that, I will...
CEO, I just want to add there that you don't need to go through the chair or me. It's just the questions go directly to whatever staff person might be talking, so you can just move ahead. And we have sort of an unusual seating arrangement here tonight in that I'm all by myself. But we kind of voted on this, and I'm the smallest target they could find. So that's pretty much why I'm sitting right here. Anyway, go ahead, CEO.
Yeah, when we plan to, between the three of us and David, Director of Finance, we plan to just interject as different pieces of information come up and different perspectives. So I will turn this over to Mr. Strachan.
Thank you. So what we're looking at is a rezoning application. So we thought we'd begin by just looking at what the local government authorities around that type of work are, and how those sort of statutes within the Local Government Act and other legislation gives local governments powers around infrastructure and around amenities for the community and for the services that are needed. So it's important to understand the legal limits of our legislative authority, so the things that govern what we can ask for and when we can ask for it, and what the legislation allows for development of rezoning applications. So this evening we're hoping to discuss and explore the requirements for off-site works, these related to direct off-site works, which is the first item we're going to discuss, as well as around community amenity contributions, and there's legislative components around that as well, and then development cost charges, which has been around for quite a few years and has legislative authorities around that, and is an item we have a bylaw in Summerland for. So beginning with direct off-site works. So these are upgrades that are required to be installed and paid for by the developer, and these are established through district bylaws or other things that are required in order for the development to take place. So an example would be water or sewer or improvements to the roadway that are necessary to access the property that are listed in the bylaw. The bylaw requires you to connect to water, so you have to have a water connection. So these are direct costs to the developer, as well as direct bylaw or regulatory requirements that the district applies and has an authority to require. So there are also works that are required to be conducted in order for the development to be feasible. So if you have a piece of pipe that needs to be put in place, or else the development can't happen, there isn't enough water for it, or they can't get rid of their sewer, those become important pieces that have to be done. They become a required piece of infrastructure, which is paid for by the applicant or the developer. So there's a number of pieces that would fit in with that we'll look at this evening, being around the water service in particular, as well as around storm, and some components to a limited level around the roadways. So an estimate for the cost of these types of works that are just direct offsite works required for the developer to pay is between 1.2 and 1.8 million. So these are the components that they're directly responsible for, and we'll go into more details around those. Chris? The second piece, which is a little bit more complicated, is around community amenity contributions. And a common misconception is that local governments have the authority at rezoning to just require components beyond what their bylaws allow, and what their authority is under legislation. So two main categories that can be brought forward. So if they're not required, so they're not directly required amenities, they become negotiated amenities. So these are amenities that either the applicant or the developer brings forward to council with their application, or they're an amenity or a contribution that the local government then negotiates with the applicant. So there has to be a negotiated process. These are contributions that cannot be required. They need to fall into this category of negotiated agreement.
Just on that note, they can't be required, but once there's a negotiation happened and there's an agreement that is had, it does get registered and becomes non-negotiable at that as the rezoning goes through. So it's not something that the developer can step away from either after.
So after it's been developed, it becomes an agreement, and then it's sort of enshrined in whatever's written out on the development?
Ultimately, the developer offers it to the district, and it becomes, they can't back out of it if it is approved.
Yes.
When Linda was just saying, or RCA was just saying, registered, is that on the land title that it's registered?
It forms part of the development agreement, so we've sort of
Okay.
been including that in our reports to council. It'll be the final agreement that's truly that, an agreement. So the amenities and the contributions and all the other pieces of infrastructure are agreed to. And then there's a covenant registered on title that you must follow according to the development agreement.
Perfect, thank you.
Do developers have to offer these things, and what's, why do they do this?
It's a good question, actually. And so there's sort of two avenues that this sort of amenities sort of work their way into the rezoning process. One is when you see developments and you need infrastructure in order to support those developments. So this came in as a negotiated component. The second point is trying to contribute to the community when you're coming in order to get support or have support for it. So that's sort of two pieces to it. One is to offset impacts. The other is to provide a true amenity. So for example, creation of traffic being an offer to improve intersection or some other component to alleviate traffic. Or coming in and doing park or some other component that's not necessarily required or beyond what's required in order to replace or augment an existing service.
Quite often it comes up when an applicant initially makes their application and they start getting some community input and they start hearing where the concerns are and where they feel that they could make an offer to add a contribution to make it more palatable.
So there's two sort of main categories. We sort of covered this. But there's two main categories. The category we're focusing on is around planning and servicing contributions, and these are looking at pieces that are related to utilities, water, sewer, drainage, road improvements, and that's the focus of most of the discussion this evening. There are avenues to establish amenity contributions through the official community plan that makes this process more homogeneous in the community, so that you are consistently making requirements of development. So if you have amenity contributions listed out in your OCP, then you have a clear path for the community, and you can demonstrate that avenue that the province is looking for, as well as the community is looking for, is clarity, consistency, and fairness through amenity contributions. So quite often communities will have specific amenities listed within their official community plan, and they'll quite often go to a lot of detail. If you don't have that planning process that's taken place, particularly around infrastructure, that clearly outlines the pieces of the larger puzzle that are required for development in the future, and that would normally take place in your infrastructure component of your OCP, then you have to look at each individual project in a lot more detail, and that's a lot of the work that's carried on over the last few months, is to look at these in more specific detail. Carrying forward as more planning work is done, and Public Works and Engineering has undertaken a lot of those larger plans around sewer water master plan, stormwater master plan, then those puzzle pieces begin to make their way into the official community plan, and hopefully will make this process for future rezoning applications a little more straightforward, and there won't be so much specific infrastructure review required. So they're limited to the capital cost, and with the subject application, so to be clear with that, these types of amenity contributions are intended to follow the same sort of criteria as DCCs in development cost charges, in that they're intended to be for the capital costs of things, not the operating. So you would have a cost for a pipeline or a road or some other component, but you wouldn't have it for the maintenance of that particular piece. So that's sort of the outline on community amenities. So the third piece that we're going to be touching on is around development cost charges. And District of Summerland has a development cost charge, but yes, please.
Sorry, before we go on to the DCCs, can you tell us if there are, no, never mind, I don't think you can tell us. I was just gonna ask, can you tell us if there are any negotiated amenity contributions, but I don't know if that would be.
Well, that's a fair question, and there have been some, which Dean, on each of the slides and each of the pieces, you're going to see where they've so far made,
Okay.
but the negotiation hasn't, they've made some suggestions.
Right.
We don't necessarily think that that's if council was going to entertain it further, that would be the best places for them. And so after this discussion tonight, before the council report came, we would be having further conversations with the developers to perhaps look at different areas that may be better for contributions.
Okay.
But I think you have an idea of what they've said originally.
So far today, what was reported to council is the sidewalks, a number of sidewalk pieces, a staircase piece, and Chris will go through those components in more detail, as well as some electrical pole removals.
I believe it was just over 1 million,
Just over $1 million.
at this point.
Thank you. Thanks.
Development cost charges. So development cost charges are specifically legislated towards specific areas of roads, sewage, water, drainage, and parkland. So these are the areas that you can do development cost charges for. And the intent of development cost charges is to collect money from development to supplement or pay for the cost of the infrastructure to facilitate that growth. So the roads and the sewer line extensions that facilitate that growth. So our development charges bylaw is a bit disconnected from where we're at with development in the community. So a lot of the projects that you'll see listed within our DCC bylaw don't really align with a lot of the development that's taking place in the community. So it needs to be updated, and we're going to talk about some components of that opportunity a little bit later in the process. So projects listed in for example, the sewer only lists the sewer plant. So there would be an opportunity to have other components of our sewer infrastructure or distribution system listed, but they're not listed in there. And components around the water system, there's only one DCC item in there. So these monies are collected on each unit or each square meter of development that takes place and can be utilized for these purposes. And you'll see them appear in the budget. There's items that delineate where we're at with these reserves, and development cost charges reserves are categorized, so you'll have so much money in each one of these reserves, and they're maintained and kept for that specific purpose. And the interesting thing about development cost charges and the bylaws around them is you can collect DCCs based on a group of projects. However, you're not required to spend those DCCs on those specific projects. You can actually go in as a council and a local government and change your project list. And that doesn't mean that the money in those reserves has to go to the old project list. It can be utilized for your new project list. So those reserves have that opportunity. Those particular bylaws to amend your development cost charge bylaw require you to get provincial approval. So they are a bit more stringent process, but that can be done. The DCCs themselves have to be supported by data and information on the different components. So you can't just go and pick a project. You have to actually demonstrate why it's needed and what components of that project are growth, and then work your DCC out of that. So there's an assist factor that comes into each DCC, and that is the contribution that comes from the city's capital towards it in order to do the projects. So the DCCs specifically for this particular project are laid out on this based on the most recent development plans that were received from the applicants, and these were presented to council in July. So what you're seeing is our current DCC bylaw applied to the different unit counts. So they have, by our categories, 230 of the large multifamily units, 139 of the small, and then the institutional piece is the piece of the complex care. So this is where you have bedrooms without kitchens kind of idea. So they're not truly an apartment, and that becomes an institutional DCC, and that is building D that you've seen in our drawings. So the different DCCs are by water, sewer, stormwater, roads, and parks. And then Chris is going to give you a breakdown with all three of these components and these costs for each one.
We have a question here. Go ahead.
It's just regarding the updating of such a bylaw. I'm wondering, because this has already been brought forward as a proposal and had readings on the table, can we assume that if we were to update the bylaw before it goes through, we would have to continue to use the numbers in the bylaw that we just saw on the chart, or can it be updated in this process?
We wouldn't have, to update it would take quite some time. We still have to get the wastewater master plan and other master plans, and it has to have ministerial approval. So it would fall under the old one.
Thank you.
And that's when you look at other costs. There may be other costs that you're going to see coming up where it is going to be a cost that we might not charge extra for. Say in the wastewater, you'll see that where we're going to say it's an off-site works that needs an upgrade in order to be, so that we're going to have to ask for that money, whereas if they were all updated, it just might be all rolled into development cost charges. It doesn't mean that they pay less, it just means that the vehicle, it just is more complicated and more negotiation.
So it's the ways and means that's different than if it was already covered.
Yeah, and it's more difficult for the developers, not so much because in this one, which is a really large one, but in a small, that's what brings uncertainty to development in a community, is if you say, well, we've got development cost charges, but they're really limited in what they cover, so we need to look at this, this, and this. It's much easier if you can go and you can see at the outset of your development what it's going to cost you.
Go ahead. Just go ahead.
Thank you. While we're on the topic of development cost charges, do you know how District of Summerland's DCCs compare to other municipalities up and down the valley? Like, are we all kind of
We
in
did
a
some
general
research,
range, or-
Dean, we did some research on some other.
Yeah, so So the benchmark it's used for sort of comparison would be single-family dwelling.
Okay.
So our single-family dwelling is 8,600, which is lower than it would be in Penticton. I don't recall the exact figure for Penticton, but we're significantly lower in that regard. And then compared to other communities up the valley, significantly lower when you get towards West Kelowna and Kelowna. You're tens of thousands, or sorry, at least 10,000 more in those communities than you would be here.
Is that because of the population? I'm not sure how that's.
It's related to a number of different components. It's related to how a DCC bylaw is structured, and more specifically, what projects you include into it. So if you add extra projects to it, that increases your DCCs.
Right.
So as you do more study and more work and understand more about your infrastructure in a community and what's going to be required for growth and what's going to be required in the future, you're going to begin to collect fees that represent what that cost is going to be.
Okay.
I have a question. I just trying to recall, but I remember a few years ago we upgraded our DCC charges, and I thought they were, you know, obviously I'm off base with this number here, but I thought they were closer to about 11,200. Is that a figure that's just
For a
foggy?
single-family dwelling?
Well, that's what I'm not sure about. I thought there was sort of a figure that was a standard figure. and
Because
we
there's many,
upgraded.
many different numbers that go
Okay.
with the DCCs, but right now it's that
It's
8,600
86, is it?
single-family dwelling.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember what
I thought it was-
particular type
I
of
thought it was-
situation it was, but I know, well, I seem to understand that we had to upgrade that, and I think the only one in the audience who might recall that would be Orv. But,
Yeah, well,
you know,
and again, we didn't bring all the details regarding the DCC bylaw specifically
Yeah,
tonight,
okay.
so we're just relying on some notes we have
Sure,
here,
no
so.
problem.
But I think the key to remember is exactly what Dean just said, and that is, for example, if our roads bylaw, DCC's bylaw only includes a project to upgrade Peach Orchard Road and one other one, for example. If you were to renew it and say all your connector roads are going to be upgraded through, or can be upgraded through a DCC bylaw, your contribution to that bylaw is going to be a lot higher than when you just have a limited number.
So as we do some refinement on the things that we're looking to do in our community, whatever that might be, whether it's a master plan for water and sewer, whether it's a downtown plan, whether it's a parks and recreation plan, all of those things then contribute to the components that become part of what can be ascribed to a DCC.
You would, exactly that, you would add in the projects that you see on the horizon in the list of projects that can be used for them. So when you have a master plan, you then have a direction of going. So you would put those top projects into the DCC bylaw so that you would then start collecting towards being able to fund them.
So the work we've started, and I'm sorry I wasn't using my mic, the work we've started to do in some of our planning will begin to contribute to a redefinition of what DCCs are composed of. In terms
Absolutely.
of growth and the expectation for our community.
A lot of times people will ask what value there is in master plans, or they seem to think they get shelved. And that's exactly the point, is that they're used to inform that kind of information.
Thank you.
Could we have the slide with the numbers on there again? The institutional, is that for the 180 beds? Is that what the latest number proposal is? Do we have a number for, people?
Yeah, it's listed out as 59 beds.
59
So
beds?
Yeah, so it's, the assisted living actually is a component of the small apartment, or the small multifamily.
Oh, okay.
They fit into that category. It's the ones that are truly just a bedroom. They'll fit into that
59,
institutional
okay.
component. So the definitions, the way they are in the bylaw, would, at this point, fit into that category because they carry a kitchen.
Okay.
And some of them actually have a bedroom in the assisted living component. But the complex care falls under a different category, where it's just a bedroom.
Yeah. And to carry that discussion further, the previous comments about DCC charges to some specifics, if the population was to continue to grow and one arena is not enough at some point in the future, we could implement development cost charges for any new housing that would then be specified for a new arena at some point in the future? Is that how this would be, specific categories work?
If you were to list those components and do the study work to demonstrate that within the Parks DCC, you could have that as part.
Yeah.
It's very limited on what parks is one of them, and of course, roads and sewer and water are, but there's other things in the community which you'll see in a minute, can't be, or in a few minutes, that can't be included in DCCs.
This-
So,
Could I ask a question? And I don't really think it falls here, but I'm just going to ask the question. There's been discussion about what's affordable, or there's opportunities for a particular application, which this one is. It's for seniors, or purportedly for seniors living. There is a way of getting assistance for people that live there. That's not part of DCCs, that's part of whoever applies for those, and they're provided by the province. You can't get them unless you apply.
yeah, not part of DCCs.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris. So now we're just going to start going through one section of the infrastructure at a time and tell you the three different components.
Yeah, so just to tie in what's been discussed so far with the direct offsite works and the proposed amenity contributions in DCCs, we'll look at at 5 components of the infrastructure. We'll look at water, stormwater, sewer, roads, and electrical, and kind of cover those 3 topics within each and explain those to council. So with water, the direct offsite works, which again, to be paid 100% by the developer. This would include looking at things like water mains, our pressure reducing valve stations, our pump houses, the impact on the water treatment plant. And so looking at all those components and doing the associated modeling with what the demand will be for this site and how it affects that whole network. So as far as direct offsite works, we've got the connection to the actual system and extending that service into the site. Other than that, though, there was a few options in a few different areas or possible connections that were looked at. There weren't any other components outside of that direct area within the development that would be impacted, that would require upgrades. As far as the developer proposed amenity contributions, there haven't been any that have been put on the table by the developer at this stage. And again, following the analysis and the modeling that was done, there weren't any that were that came to light that would make sense to be brought forward or to be recommended to be considered in that area as well.
So, I mean, these are the costs that you modeled, in the development. These are off-site required things that the developer pays for. Are there any costs, according to, related to water, that we're having to carry in any respect towards this project? This is it as far as the water costs go?
Right, so yeah, everything that's required to bring water, connect to our system and bring it to site to service that development is 100% paid by the developer, and those are the only components that have
And
been
they
identified.
pay for everything from their property line in, of course.
You'll see on,
course, yeah.
you'll see on
Of course.
some next slides on some of the other components that there are works that are off, that are, that do need some discussion.
I
So
see.
water is the most straightforward one as far as the lack of impact to the overall system.
I see, thank you.
So the pumping stations or whatever we already have pretty well look after that area, and there aren't upgrades needed in between the site that's maybe developed and the treatment plant.
Correct.
Okay.
So does that satisfy, for example, fire flows?
Yes, yes
It
it
does.
does. Yeah, that's definitely a component. That's typically your highest demand on these, on
Okay.
development
So
sites,
it
is
has,
to meet that
as a
fire
peak
flow.
type of flow, it has to meet.
Yep.
And this would supply the money to meet that kind of demand, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so based on the, different, like I said, there were different connections and different options to service this site because there is water that fronts more than one side of the development. It's
Yeah.
on Latimer, it's also on Solly by Bristow. So whether they're looking to connect on Solly to Bristow or looking to connect on Latimer, there would be the connection costs and then any improvements to that system to make sure that that flow gets there. But other than that immediate area, there's nothing further away, a pump station, a PRV that needs to be upgraded.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
No, you go right ahead, don't have
Okay,
to go
okay.
through me. Just go
Um,
right ahead.
Would this affect any of the surrounding businesses or houses at all, in terms of the amount of water coming when they're building, or then afterwards?
No, so when it's modeled, it looks at the existing demands on the system and
Okay.
how this impacts and affects the existing flows that we're already seeing.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
So further to Councillor Trainer's question, there would just be scheduled water shutdowns just for the connection portion of it?
Correct.
I mean, that,
Yeah.
that
So,
wouldn't take
yeah,
very
as a
long, but I'm just.
Yeah, so as we move
yeah.
into detailed design and the selected connection point is confirmed, then those works would be scheduled accordingly.
Right. And may I ask one other question? If you could just go back to the slide that has the table, just for a second. I don't see electrical up there. Should it be up there?
Not on DCCs, and we'll be talking about electrical today.
Okay,
But it's
so-
one of them that you cannot collect DCCs for
Okay.
electrical utility.
Thank you.
So the final item we had on water here is the development cost charges. So we do have a development cost charge in the district bylaw for water. The total payable based on the current development plan is $439,700. So the development projects that are listed in the DCC bylaw for the water system is one project. It's the Trout Creek System Upgrade, as per the UMA study that was done. So those DCCs are paid at building for the project and would go towards that project at this time. So that's what they would go into reserve for. So they would be required to pay their direct offsite costs because these are the works that are necessary for them to move forward with the project. At this point, there's no amenity contributions in addition to those direct offsite costs. And those direct offsite costs for water are part of the number that I spoke to at the intro, which is between 1.2 and 1.8 million. As we work through the different components, you'll see direct offsite works listed. We unfortunately don't have a breakdown for each of the services, but that's where that 1.2, 1.8 million is being spent by the applicant for that component. This is independent of the costs they pay for DCCs. DCCs are just that, they're development cost charges, so they're supplemental charge that is paid at building permit that goes into our reserves for these particular projects.
Could I ask, and it might be to David, in terms of how are the DCCs developed? Are they based on the unit? Are they based on the value of anything at any point in time? How are they developed?
Go ahead, Chris.
So basically, that's where your master plans would identify what projects are required in the next, say, 20, 25 years
But
for
the-
each of those components.
So it's not based on anything to do with the development that may or may not be passed. It's based on your list and your own future development.
That's right. There's a formula that is predetermined that goes into the development of the bylaw.
Thank you.
And it's applied to whatever application it is.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next is stormwater. So again, under the direct offsite works, and just to clarify, what's listed here are examples of what these direct offsite works. It's not meant to be an all-inclusive list, but just to give a sense of what are some of the direct costs that go along with servicing the site for each of the different infrastructure components. So extension of the discharge pipe offsite. So with this development, all of the stormwater that falls on-site needs to be captured, stored, and then released at a restricted rate into our stormwater system, which then makes its way down across Lake Shore to Lake Okanagan. So with that is the extension of that discharge pipe to connect into our system. And then from there, any downstream upgrades that are required from that connection point through the existing system to the outfall location. Again, with the proposed amenity contributions with stormwater, none have been proposed by the developer, and through the analysis and the modeling, there haven't been any that have been identified for stormwater. It's somewhat of a limited system where There are a number of different collection areas all along the lakefront and small service zones or service areas that these different outfalls collect the water from and discharge it into the lake. So there's not a lot of other areas or other developments that would or could potentially tie into the to the stormwater main that the Banks Crescent development is looking to connect to.
So there's a number of outlets that already are there to discharge from the stormwater system anywhere along there?
Yep.
I see, okay.
So DCCs.
Can I just ask for clarification, and hopefully this will be the last time. It's okay. The off-site works, regardless of what category that we're looking at, that's all part of the 1.2 to 1.8 million, and then the DCCs are specific to the utility or
That-
parks
and
or whatever that we're
completely
looking at.
separate. That's
And
right.
completely separate.
That's right.
Yes.
So in addition.
That's right.
Thank
And
you.
separate to the amenity contributions when we get to one where we're talking about numbers. So the three of them are three distinct contributions.
Right. Thank you.
If I might ask about the extension of discharge pipes and offsite, are they modeled to 100-year? Are they modeled to rainfall? How are they decided or whether they needed to be? You're saying they don't need to be, so how are they modeled?
Yeah, so the storage of the water on site would be stored to a 1 in a 100-year storm.
Okay.
And then released at pre-development rates into the system. So it looks at what are the pre-development runoff rates from this area of land, and they need to store the difference between that and the 1 in a 100-year storm. And they can release at that rate back into our
You
system.
speak into the mic clearly, please.
That's right.
Thanks. Good, thanks.
So with the storm in our currently DCC bylaw, we've got 8 projects listed. None of the projects are listed within this area. So these DCCs are payable for the development of 147, and that would go into reserve towards these other projects, Jubilee, Trunk. So when this DCC bylaw, these projects lists were developed, other lands were being considered for development. So these reflect, so the first one in here is reflective of Cartwright, for example. So you'll see the DCC projects, some of the road projects as well as the storm projects are connected to the Cartwright development because that development plan has been in place for quite some time. Whereas other areas in the community where development is occurring, that plan hasn't been yet updated to reflect what projects require upgrades in order to provide service to those developments.
But just on that note, just to reiterate what Mr. Stockton said at the beginning, as Councilor Carlson mentioned, you can't add a project now and then have it covered by a DCC if it, for this development. But if you change you can change the project list. So whatever money that they're paying into it may not be going to these projects. The monies will go to the new project list that council comes up with.
Is that the project list that has to be approved by the province, or
Province.
is that?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
As part of the
And that takes
master
a length
plan?
of time.
No, but kind of coming out, the master plan will help council inform what should be on the project list.
Got it.
And that conversation is not really related to the development, it's just good information to know.
Okay, moving on to sewer. So just to recap, with sewer, looking at the collection system that collects the wastewater, looking at any lift stations that would pump and lift that sewage back into the collection system or to the wastewater treatment plant, as well as the wastewater treatment plant itself. So looking at the direct offsite works for this development, again, the extension of the pipe offsite, connection to our existing sewer, and then there's been a section of main that's been identified downstream that would require upgrades. Based on this development and the projected flows from it, it would cause a section to surcharge or to become over capacity. So it's been flagged as one that would be directly required to be upgraded as part of this work. For the amenity contributions, so another area that we looked at was further downstream, we have the Butler Street lift station. So we reviewed the capacity of that and the impact of this development on that capacity and if there were future upgrades that may be required there. the analysis showed that there's sufficient capacity in the lift station now to handle this development as well as others. So at this time, there's no recommended amenity contributions for the sewer as well.
We did have a conversation earlier in preparation for the meeting. Things like that downstream system upgrades, which you see on the direct offsite works. It's not part of a bylaw. It's not part of like the first two where it says connection to existing sewer system. You would read the bylaw and you would find out how much you need to charge for that, because it says to connect into a system, it's this amount plus the actual cost of labor, et cetera. The downstream systems upgrade theoretically could either be a proposed amenity contributions or a direct offsite works, because it's not part of the property. It's down, part of the, it's just a piece of the sewer system that for some reason or another technically can't handle that amount of flows. So in our conversation, we've said it's not a proposed amenity contribution. The development can't go ahead if it wasn't done, so it shouldn't be a negotiated item. It should be a requirement of them to pay it because they need it in order to, there's no negotiation really there.
Yeah, so as noted at the bottom there under DCCs as well, is that as we get our master plan updated, right now there is only the wastewater treatment plant that's listed as one project in there under the sewer DCCs. So looking at our lift stations and the catchment areas for them and the potential development that could occur and those upgrade projects, that's what we would be evaluating and looking to bring forward as potential capital projects that could be rolled into the DCC bylaw.
Question, go ahead.
Yeah, the second bullet there said developer proposed amenity contributions, but didn't you just say that there isn't any?
In the sewer, because we moved that downstream system upgrades up to the offsite works. So right now, the developer has not made any proposed amenity contributions that we're going towards sewer. Not to say that we wouldn't identify. I mean, we haven't right now identified a suggested place that would make sense at sewer. But if we did, that's what we're saying. It could change what final agreement comes to council.
So it could have been an amenity thing, but because the system can't handle it, moves up to be a direct offsite cost that they have to pay. We
could have said, geez, we would strongly suggest that you include this in your amenity contribution, but it would be a little misleading because it's required, it's needed. So that's why we moved it up to say this isn't negotiable.
Gotcha. Okay.
You need to pay it because you need it for your development.
So that's what that second bullet refers to.
Yeah, and the one component I spoke about was the Butler Street lift station, and looking at that, initially it was identified that maybe that was a potential amenity contribution that could be considered. After reviewing it, though, the capacity that it currently flows at is about 50%, and this development would only put it up to about 65%. So there's sufficient capacity there that remained. If that was significant or having a larger impact on that lift station, or was putting it closer to a future upgrade, and if there were significant other areas that may be flowing to this in the future, that's where we may look at identifying it and having this development pay for its fair share of that upgrade in the future. However, at this point, there isn't a foreseeable upgrade in the future to that lift station.
Are you talking DCCs anymore? Okay. So then okay, go ahead.
So then looking at roads, sort of broke this one up a little bit. It's a little bit more complex than the pipe systems that we've been talking about so far. So looking at the sort of the existing conditions that exist right now there on Solly Road and Latimer, the estimated traffic volumes are around 1,500 vehicles a day. That was based on a one-day count that was done in the traffic study, as well as looking at the 2007 traffic master plan volumes for that road. The projected volumes from this development would be just over 2,000 vehicles a day at full build-out. So noted below are the phases. So phase one being the assisted living and the senior center making up about 500 of that 2,000, and then the market housing condos to be 1,500. So some of the existing challenges with this road obviously are, with the location of this site would be the narrow widths of the roadway, the tight corners, the grades and slopes on that existing road, and the existing condition and structure of that roadway. So I guess one to note, like, although it's not like a sewer pipe where, say a local road typically handles 1,000 vehicles a day. As soon as we hit that 1,000 mark, it's not required that we have to immediately upgrade that now to a collector standard. It's sort of up to, there's no obligation and no actual trigger to those. It's sort of what the district deems practical for the upgrades to ensure that there's sufficient capacity and level of service on that roadway for the vehicles that are traveling it.
So roads, without a question, the most discussion will probably revolve around roads, and that's where it's really important to think about it, not in terms of just in a holistic view of how we handle roads in the community, developments, and how much development should pay towards the upgrade of a road. If you have a road that's already theoretically at by the book, a collector level, and the district hasn't invested in that road over the years, should a development pay all of it, a portion of it? To what extent? To a full collector road, or to safe travel, or to what extent? And I want to make it clear here that staff is trying to present the information that we have so far without any, at this point in time, it's not recommendations or it's not preferences, it's just trying to get the information out. It's not biased as far as you shouldn't charge or you should charge, it's just to get the information out. So we are going to look at breaking down the pieces of it, and I think, Dean, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just roads are the one piece of the infrastructure we talked about so far that you have contact with every day. So it is a piece of infrastructure that isn't as black and white as sewer, water lines, storm lines that are in the ground. The impact is maybe different in that way. There's also, because it's directly used by people, it has a subjective component to it. So its capacity, yes, has an engineered volume, but the congestion that it creates also has a subjective component to it, and how much a community would accept or residents would accept that congestion. So it does have a subjective component, one like a sewer flow rate or a water flow rate. It has a piece in it that involves directly with people. It also plays a role that's very different in land use planning and how we look at it from a land use planner's perspective, in that it is that direct contact with people every day. So those structures play a significant role in the community and how it feels, how it grows, how people interact with it, how it's used by pedestrians and cyclists. So it's one of the pieces of infrastructure that is visible and has a bigger role in how the community develops, and plays an important role for land use planning, which is quite significantly different than the other pieces of infrastructure.
You used the term collector road. What's the definition of a collector road?
So a collector road is one that typically handles up to 8,000 vehicles per day.
Okay.
So in general terms, you have a local road, so then you'd go a wider roadway would be your collector, then it goes up to an arterial roadway.
So how much traffic should a road have before it's upgraded to a collector standard?
So typically, it's not the actual volume on the roadway that's looked at. You look at the capacity of the intersections and the impact that they have there. And so they'll look at the turning movements and the traffic volumes that go through intersections. And typically, it's graded then on a level of service scale to determine when does it hit a point where the level of service has degraded to a point where upgrades are required.
So is the Solly Road as it is now, to a standard that is acceptable for the amount of traffic that it has now, or should it even now have, as it sits, be upgraded?
And that's exactly what we're, in the next, if you can hold that thought, there's going to be some more slides, but that's exactly the point is, you know, how do we handle roads overall in the community? Are there roads that should be upgraded in their current, should Solly Road or Latimer Road, if you were looked at that and it wasn't for budget constraints or priorities, that it isn't already upgraded, and to what extent should a development contribute to bringing it to that standard? So those are all the questions that hopefully council will have an opportunity to kind of talk out a little bit. But one, oh, Doug, Councillor Holmes.
So basically what you're saying is that the numbers, which I doubt are really accurate, doesn't really matter. It's the capacity of the road.
That's right, and that's, when you talk to other communities and you talk to people from the ministry and just trying to talk about some best practices, that's what they say, is that it's not roads. Yes, you do counts on roads, and you and you would try to get some sort of consistency, but it is because you can never keep up with roads, especially in a district municipality like ours. You can't keep it up to the standard, so it is it's how well the road can be traveled, how safe the road can be traveled, and it's less. The numbers show this, so you must do that.
So, oh, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
And then, so we're talking about Solly here Road, but what about Latimer and Gillespie? And
We're gonna
and
talk
these- and
both.
the-
We're gonna
and-
talk.
and you're gonna-
Yeah.
Okay.
So just an additional to what Doug's saying. So, you know, over the last, say, 20, 30 years, there's been growth down there with some new subdivisions, newer houses and so on. So they start to add traffic to Solly. But, so it's not, once you get to that, like you say, I guess it's serviceability, so to speak, you start to look at what point you may have to upgrade it anyway. And so when you talk about an uptick in the amount, and in this case it would be quite a bit more, then, you know, that's where you start to negotiate.
That's where the community amenity contributions, and again, you'll see that in a minute, come into play. That's where you start saying, is there a ratio to play? If it's $1 million to upgrade it to a level that could be handled well for this development, should 2/3 of it be paid by the development and 1/3 by the district? Should it be 50-50? Should it be 100%? And it becomes a negotiation on, is that a phased-in amount? So maybe Chris, start to look at what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Before you go on to that, I missed something in what you said. I have a couple of questions about the traffic. Phase 1 is 527. That's additional vehicles per day of that 2,032,
Yes.
correct? And then you were saying that phase 1 is assisted living and the senior center. Is assisted living the memory care part of the proposed facility?
It's a combination of the assisted living as well as the complex care. So the complex care, so
complex care.
it's the two buildings that form part of the seniors facility that would fit into that category, because they have units that are complex care. So those are the bedroom units, 59 bedroom units, but they also have components that are assisted living units within those buildings. And there's
So-
also
Oh, sorry.
currently in their proposal, they have two different room configurations. So there may be a graduation of the level of assistance that's provided, which is quite common in seniors care facilities.
So the assisted living and the complex care, that's all grouped into the senior center?
That's
Like,
sort of
what you're
the
referring-
phase they've identified as the two phases within their traffic studies. So they updated their traffic studies to reflect the unit count numbers that were updated in July. But there's
Okay.
two development phases that are currently proposed, and one phase would be the complex care and the assisted living component.
Okay.
And the second phase is the rest of the remainder of the development.
So the market housing and the townhomes
The
and
market
things.
housing would be within the phase 2 component.
Okay. And one final question on this. Those figures are at completion of phase 1 and completion of phase 2, like best estimates?
That's correct.
And it doesn't include construction traffic? That's just for residents that are actually living there after the phases are completed?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
The word connection, so the roads that connect a development are, and I can't remember are they off-site? Are they, I'm going back to the earlier part of the discussion, so if it's a connector road, does it fall into one as opposed to another?
I think that'll come, Chris, are you going to talk about that?
As you go forward?
Yeah, so that, I guess, jumping to here, so that's where, sorry, I'll just step back once, just looking at some of the direct off-site works. That's where we would look at the actual connection and access to the site. So from Latimer, near Banks Crescent, where the current road right-of-way is the accesses from that roadway to the site and what's required there as being some of the direct off-site works that are required to facilitate this development. There's obviously an existing road network around it. It's not like a greenfield development where you're extending a roadway a significant length to service this development. So based on that, like I mentioned before, the traffic report looked at the surrounding roadways and looked at the intersection of Solly and Latimer, and looked at how vehicles were going to access this site to determine what's required. So that's where we have the improvements to Latimer near the corners, near the proposed accesses, as well as some realignment of Solly and Latimer intersection to add a left-hand turn from Latimer to Solly to realign or reconfigure that intersection to allow turning movements to occur safely.
From Solly to Latimer?
From Latimer to Solly, a left-hand turn.
Latimer to Solly, thank you.
So then as we look at, move into the other components, that's where we're looking at the roadways themselves. So Latimer Road, Solly Road, what are their existing conditions? What's the existing widths? Is that sufficient to handle this additional traffic? The developer has proposed some amenity contributions with regards to roads, is installing sidewalk along one side of the road all the way along Solly and Latimer, so basically from Highway 97 to the site. And the proposed staircase walkway, which I believe extended from McDonald Place through right-of-ways and made its way down towards Lakeshore. So I guess where we would like to have some discussion is based on Latimer and Solly. So if the traffic is looking to move or increase from that 1,500 vehicles a day to 3,500 vehicles a day, do the existing conditions facilitate that traffic? For a collector roadway, we would expect it to be 8.6 meters wide and have sidewalk on one side. And so based on that, what would that look like? What would the parameters within that existing roadway be? So looking at a high level as far as on Solly to get to that 8.6 meter wide with sidewalk on one side, we'd estimate that those costs would be around $1.2 million. And then Latimer would be about $600,000 to widen it and get it to that standard. And that's full reconstruction, which would put in what's considered a collector subbase with pit run and gravel and asphalt to the acceptable thicknesses that would handle those additional vehicles a day and would last versus just looking at leaving what's there now, which likely doesn't have those acceptable levels.
And that would be Solly from the highway down to turning into Latimer?
Correct.
Thank you.
And this is where we believe that the majority of the discussion on the amenity contributions would be that $1.2 million figure that Chris said and the $600,000 figure. Of those figures, what would be reasonable for the developer to think that they should pay in order to have these roads upgraded to a level that our utility department or works department feels is an appropriate level of construction?
Just a quick question. What about access for individual properties in terms of driveways and stuff like that? How is that dealt with?
Yeah, so the current accesses would be accommodated with the widening. We're looking at typically Solly, it varies from 8 meters to 10 meters wide currently. Latimer is averaged around 7 meters. So we're talking a meter or half a meter to 1.5 meters widening of the roadway. So it's not, we're not talking 5 meters and extending right to property line or right right to the existing abutments of those properties and those residences. But not to say that there won't be impacts on some of the steeper driveways that front there. There definitely are a few areas that are going to be constrained, and where a creative solution will need to be looked at on how that's done. If we're looking at a full reconstruction of the roadway, though, we can also look at what that existing grade is and possibly bringing up that elevation to help offset some of that difference that we're going to see in elevation from where we would tie into the roadway and where it is today.
Yeah, 'cause
And-
I'm not, I'm concerned about the grade that people have now. I would want to make sure that the grades that are achieved are similar or easier than what they have now.
And we had a few of those technical challenges on Garnet Valley Road.
Okay.
In the construction project there was some that had steep driveways and challenging accesses, and there was quite a bit of work that had to be done, and it's a similar conversation with this, although they've done the preliminary review
Because
on it.
I recall when Cartwright was done, that development, and the main road that was going in, when they put in the curb and gutter, it actually ended up having an elevation change for the driveways that meant individuals actually bottomed out. And I happened to be walking it one day and observed that and saw people having difficulties. And essentially, all that curb and gutter had to be ripped out and redone to give people the proper inclines so they could access the road without any difficulty. And, the engineering being done, et cetera, and it was seen quite quickly before the sidewalks went in or anything that they had to make that adjustment. So the curb had to come out, and they redid it, essentially.
Yeah. And again, we're talking at a high level,
Yeah,
not
okay.
at detailed design stage right now. So looking at sort of generally what's there, what the widths are, where there are constraints, where there are tight areas, there definitely will be some challenges that'll have to be worked out in the detailed design if this were to go ahead and that's the width that we're looking at. But what we see there isn't insurmountable. There's definitely things that could be done to mitigate those.
Okay, thank you.
Would there be any expropriation, and I know we're at a high level, you may not be able to tell me this, but would there be any expropriation of properties?
Yeah, those aren't anticipated. Looking at the existing road right-of-ways that are there, varying from 16 meters to 20 meters, there's none that have been flagged at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Barkle?
I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I was just wondering if there's a way of getting a feel of what the 3,000 cars a day on a road with a sidewalk on one side would feel like. Would the traffic, say, and the only place I can think of right now is, say, from the oval about to the Giant's Head School.
Are you into your mic? I know
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
having trouble hearing.
Okay, yeah, the oval about to the Giant's Head School, similar, I think there's a sidewalk, maybe on both sides there. What sort of traffic, do you know what the traffic is in that area?
Yeah, based on we have the speed read signs that we've
Yeah.
recently installed. Based on just pulling a typical day, we were seeing around 5,000 vehicles a day.
Okay.
Oh, don't look at me,
Oh,
just go
sorry.
right
I'm
to
just
staff.
used to doing
Sorry.
that. I'm just wondering why a sidewalk along Sully would be an amenity and not a requirement.
So it's listed up here as a proposed amenity contribution from the developer.
Mhm.
If we're looking at an 8.6 meter collector road, there would be a requirement through that to have it on one side.
So that was before they were realizing that depending on the final details on what we decide to do, if the road, it will be incorporated into the road, which will also be an amenity contribution though, but it'll be incorporated into that. So that's before there was even a consideration that it would be, from their minds, that it would be a requirement. So,
Okay, if the road needs to be upgraded to allow more traffic, then how come?
it doesn't.
I just don't understand why it's
But that's what we're
amenity.
trying to say, is there's nothing that says that it has to be. There's no, it's not the same as a sewer or something where the flows say it has to be, even with the traffic counts, because it's not really about the traffic counts, it's what the road can handle. So it's not treated the same way as the water and sewer. It's very much treated like an amenity contribution, and it's the whole package. So we just put what they originally said up there, but we didn't say, that's not what the final outcome's gonna look like.
Okay.
So there's nothing that says they're required. What
Yeah.
we're saying is that ultimately, council's not gonna, likely gonna consider the proposal, if you are gonna consider it, without upgrade of the roads.
Okay.
May I ask another question? The 1.2 million to get the 1.2 million that you've quoted for the direct off-site works, does that is, included in that is the widening of Solly to 8.6 meters?
No.
No.
You're talking the
So-
1.2 million quoted as the cost for upgrading Solly Road in its entirety? Or are you talking about the direct off-site works that were listed at the beginning that the developer's paying as required?
Two separate numbers.
They're two separate numbers.
Sorry, say that again?
So go back to the.
I'm
off-site
a
works.
little confused, sorry.
Oh, it's, so the direct off-site works is not the $1.2 million that we were talking about for community amenity contribution.
Yes, I realize that. I mean, maybe I'll ask it this way. A couple of the direct off-site works that you gave as examples would be improvements to Latimer, including adding a left lane from Latimer to access Solly Road. What portion of the 1.2 million, which is off-site,
Yes, yeah,
Right.
so at the start, Dean quoted 1.2 to 1.8 as being the offsite.
okay, so
Estimation.
I guess my question is, what portion of the 1.2 million is taken up by the two off-site works that you just spoke of? The improvements to Latimer and the left lane?
Yeah, we don't have the breakdown of what each of their
Okay.
their required, or the direct offsite works were to make up that 1.2 to 1.8 that the developer has said is what they're looking at for offsite works. But the components for roadways that have been determined as being direct offsite would be the access improvements from the site directly onto Latimer, as
Right.
well as the minor intersection improvements to add that left turn.
Okay,
So then what I was talking about was then to look at widening and upgrading Latimer fully to a 8.6 meter collector road with sidewalk on one side. We were
Solly, you mean?
Latimer and Solly. So Latimer
Oh,
was
Latimer and
600,000
Solly.
and Solly was 1.2.
Okay,
So not to get those mixed up with the direct offsite work number that was quoted at the start for, the water connections, the sewer
Okay.
connections, the storm. Yeah,
So this
Okay,
is
s-
another 1.2 and another
the other
600,000.
600,000.
yeah.
Which would
Okay,
be,
which we have to discuss.
if that was to be collected, or a
Right.
portion of it would be collected, it would be collected under community contribution, amenity contribution, not as a direct off-site cost.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I see where the subjectiveness comes in, since, prior to this, we've paid for sidewalks on Solly Road over the years, up and around the corner and such. It was a long battle for one councillor who really agitated to get those sidewalks in and such. And so whether we pay for further improvements or they pay for them is a good question. Yes, I see. And I think, okay.
So it is this particular project is a somewhat infill in that it has infrastructure surrounding it, and where it's actually a little more simple is when you have a greenfield development where there's no road to it, and then it becomes a direct cost because it becomes an essential thing. There's no discussion or negotiation about whether you're going to have road access to your development, so it becomes much more clear and moves from being an amenity contribution to being a direct cost. You have to have a road to get to your proposed subdivision. So when we look at greenfield subdivisions that are located in areas where there's no development, they're paying as a direct cost those pieces. So there's sections within the Hunters Hill project that would have fallen into that category, as well as the components of Cartwright, where there's going to be public roads that don't exist at all right now. Where it gets more complicated, and this process is where we're at now, is when there's an existing roadway that has a level of capacity to it, and then it becomes, well, what is the ultimate capacity the council feels is necessary for that roadway, and what the numbers are telling us as far as traffic capacity and who pays for what.
And that's why it's much simpler when you have a DCC bylaw that can go to general upgrades of your, as roads get busier, everybody's contributing to all of the road, just to your road network and your, not to say that there's not contributions that should be made, but the piece that's for the general, then that's, it can be paid for through the DCC contributions.
Yeah. But I guess one thing to also highlight is that this is an infill in a challenging topography of the area. Like, it is a hillside scenario that we're looking at. No level of upgrade is going to change the steepness of the area, or is going to be able to, without significant upgrades and purchasing of land, change the corners that exist on Solly right now. So just to keep that in mind too, that we are constrained by some of the bounds of what is existing there. And there's only so much that can be upgraded or improved to make things along that road better.
And further with that, that is a challenge that's in many places in Summerland. And we face that with development on a small scale with driveways and a large scale with trying to access some of the areas we have opportunities to develop and grow into. It's the nature of Summerland's landscape.
So philosophically speaking, if there's, big improvements to the road, or improvements as much as they can be, all traffic would benefit from it, the existing traffic and the new traffic, I guess.
That's certainly the big consideration to take into place on when you're looking at your ratio of who pays for what portions.
So are you saying, just to add to that, you're saying that, for example, say because of the way the DCC's or the bylaw is now, perhaps there's, we are past an upgrade point perhaps on some of our roads. This might be one of them. It should have been there should have been some upgrading perhaps already, or?
I don't know if it's a should have or it's a standard that it's
Okay.
not a secret that
Just-
our roads in Summerland
No, it's not.
are not where we'd like them to be. Giant's Head Road is not in the shape that we'd like it to be in. And so the DCC bylaw theoretically should be broader scope so that we can spend the money on a broader capital projects and a broader range of roadworks on a prioritized basis.
Yeah, I see. Okay, thank you.
The other side of that philosophical coin, and Giant's Head made me think of it, is that you wouldn't want to add traffic to a road without seeing the people who are going to be the additional traffic paying for
That portion at least.
improvements.
Yeah, and that's exactly, like I say, we're not coming out with recommendations to council tonight. It'll be in a report to council for next council meeting, but certainly we will be having some discussions with the applicant to suggest that they look at the possible contributions towards those road upgrades in their total amenity contributions.
Could I ask another question related to this discussion? If with the 1,500 vehicles per day currently on Solly Road, has there been, well, I guess I have two kind of questions. Has there been, I guess, incident with there being too much traffic for that road to handle until now? And my second question, I've forgotten my second question already. Just a sec.
It's an age thing,
Oh.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know. My second question is, when we're talking about the projects that are listed, say, on the roads master plan, as ones that have already been approved by the province, whenever that would have happened, is an upgrade to Solly Road shown on there?
I think that you're getting confused between the DCC bylaw, which is the roads that council picks, which will tell you which ones are on it, but it's not, the master plan is a separate document, and it doesn't.
Oh, that's right. It informs that
Right,
list
yeah,
that is
exactly.
submitted.
It helps inform a list most of the time, not
Right.
always, because some communities don't have a master plan and they still put things in their DCC bylaw. It just has to be reasonable, or hopefully the minister wouldn't approve it. Dean can just go over the ones that are on our list.
Yeah.
now.
Oh, that would be great. And then we can hear if Solly Road is on there.
It's not on there,
It's not on there.
no.
Okay.
So the only pieces of infrastructure in that particular area are Peach Orchard Road,
Okay.
but also one of the roads is Jubilee Road, as well as Lakeshore Drive with certain components of it, as well as Prairie Valley Road. So those are the roads that we have listed in our DCC bylaw. So that would have been the projects at the time the bylaw was created. They were identified, were costed out, and then divided by the number of units that they anticipated would come into the community, and then DCC calculated from that.
So theoretically, if any work has been done on those roads over the last few years, they should have come up, the monies to pay for those road upgrades should have come out of that DCC bylaw. We're not entirely sure that it did, right, David? But, I mean, you can use your general capital funds, but it's a resource that you have.
Could you tell me the year that the DCC was was examined last or passed last?
Yeah. Oh, it's consolidated. Just a minute. Yeah, well, the last time there was a amendment to it was this December 14th, 2015. It was created in 2004. It was adopted by the Inspector of Municipalities in 2006. And then it looks like there was an amendment done in 2015, but it's a consolidated one we have here, so we can't tell what the amendment was.
So it's quite a while ago.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. When I was first on council.
Further to the sort of the philosophical aspects of the factors to consider on the contribution expected for the road, I guess if you had a small development of 15 units, you would expect a small contribution. And if you have a very large development, you would expect a very large contribution. When will council have an opportunity to discuss what our expectations are and give you a mandate to negotiate with the developer on what our expectations are?
Well, I think it would be the other way around. We would talk to the developer. We'll be bringing about more details on this. I mean, more conversation tonight, and then we would go to the developer and say, you know, they'll know what the extent of the conversation today. What is have you changed your ideas on your amenity contributions that you want to propose? We will include that in our report next week, which will just summarize all of this information more written down in a report style so you can see it and feel it. And then included on that, the developer has suggested an amenity contribution of such and such for these reasons, and then council may have a conversation, maybe suggesting that there be some other ideas or that they may want to. But you can't mandate a negotiated number. I mean, ultimately, you decide in your discussions of when you're considering the proposal, whether or not it's sufficient or not.
Yeah, I guess that would be presupposing an approval to say, well, we want this amount or anything like that.
yeah.
We basically just have to take what they're willing to put on the table and then consider it as the whole part of the
Okay.
overall, is it a pro or is it a benefit or not?
You can't sell zoning.
Yeah.
The roads that are on that list, are they in any particular order, or they're just there?
No, it just means that if council was considering in a capital project, if council was deciding to do a capital project and involve one of those roads, they could say that the funding source came from this road's DCC
Okay.
reserve fund rather than from the general capital fund. It's
Okay.
just, there's no priority or anything like that.
And up until recently, was Garnet Valley Road on this list?
No, which is why we could not use funds from the DCC bylaw for our contribution on that project.
On the Garnet Valley, okay. Thank you.
And so this development, did we talk about how much they're contributing to DCCs? So they would be this development would be contributing $1.4 million to the DCC bylaw over and above what they would contribute to to any kind of improvements to a community amenity.
That's the total for sewer and water or
No,
just
this is
roads?
roads only.
Just roads alone, okay.
So we can't use that $1.4 million to upgrade Solly Road.
That's right, not until there's unless there was at some time an amendment to the bylaw.
Not until we've done a whole pile of paperwork and submitted it to the provincial government, right? Yeah.
So is the implication there with Councillor's question that that money sits there and can't actually be used for upgrading the road?
For Solly, at this point in time, it could not be used for Solly Road, but it could be at some, I mean, if this proposal went through, and it's not gonna happen in the next, it's not gonna suddenly be starting to be built within a certain amount of time. If council decided in the meantime to amend this
I
bylaw
see.
and add more roads to it, it would be a possibility.
I see, okay, thank you.
But otherwise, the cost, the 1.2 or whatever it's determined at, that if we're not able to use money from the DCC, that's where we have the discussion on how much the developer should pay in terms of a contribution amenity.
And I think that should be a separate conversation too. So you would say, of the $1.2 million, should the developer be responsible for 800,000 of that? And should we be responsible for 400? And if we're responsible for 400, how are we going to fund that 400? And then we would choose, if this had been amended and available, we would choose to use it out of that maybe. If it hadn't been done, we would choose it through a general capital reserve, or those are the conversations. You wouldn't necessarily say they should pay more because you haven't updated this, or they should pay less because this is updated. What's right for them to pay is right
Now,
regardless.
Yeah. Okay.
One way or another, yeah.
Yes, one way or the other. Thank you. Okay.
And they just want to make a very large offer to make it more palatable to the community, and it's
Well, like we've said, the amenity contribution that they're talking about right now is between 1 and 1.4 million in general, but it's not broken. It's not broken out, and it might not be for pieces of infrastructure that council thinks is that valuable compared to a
Right,
full upgrade
right.
of these roads or something.
our priorities, yeah.
So that's where the discussion, especially between Dean and the developer, comes in, where they really look at what messaging they're hearing from council and the community.
But just maybe you can clarify this, that I assume that when there's a certain amount of money, like you're saying, 1.4 or 1.2, the developer hasn't just said, well, how much money do you think it's gonna make to make this palatable?
No.
Certainly, he's made some kind of estimate of the road requirements to make it suitable for that particular
He hasn't
development.
suggested any contribution towards the road right now. So we haven't had the community contribution conversation with him since the very beginning of the project, when, even before Dean was the development approving officer, development director. So they haven't revisited that and looked at, were these ever even close to the right? Is a stairwell down more important than a road upgrade, and that kind of thing.
So to follow on that then, if up on this slide it suggests that those are the proposed ones. That was the original conversation. But when it says sidewalk along Solly and Latimer, in the numbers that we heard, the 1.2 and the 6, does that include widening plus sidewalk on one side? Okay. So part
Yes.
of that conversation has already begun. It's just a matter of how much does that cost compared to getting the road resurfaced and widened and all of that?
Absolutely, that's right.
And I know that at council, just over general discussions, there was some discussion that a staircase, which was suggested would be wood, is not really a very good, that maybe the staircase is not the kind of amenity that's useful to the community.
precisely, as opposed to what else might be.
Yes, exactly. But certainly sidewalks to the community would be an attractive thing and a safety feature to have.
Yes.
Okay, the last component was electrical. So like the other components, we looked at what the demands were going to be from this development, what that impact had on our electrical system, and what requirements would be direct off-site works that would be paid for by the developer. So in this case, we've got construction electrical, which was as part of the construction works. There's existing overhead poles that are on site, and that service the site from the west. And so in order for construction to proceed, those poles need to come down, and there needs to be a new service brought up from Lakeshore from the east, and have significant or enough capacity for the construction activities to be carried out. Also in our modeling, we looked at there would be an upgrade required from Highway 97 to the site, so the conductor that's currently overhead through that section, upgrading that to have enough capacity to service what the demands of this development are, as well as connection fees within our bylaw. One of the proposed amenities that was also brought forward by the developer was converting the remainder of that overhead section, so removing the poles on site as part of construction, but then from the site to Lakeshore, looking at putting that remainder of that section underground as well, removing an additional 5 poles that extend to the east from the site.
Do you consider that important? That means, does the district consider that important, not you personally?
I don't think we've really evaluated.
We had a pretty robust conversation on that, because I think, I think it was one of the conversations that happened when, at the very beginning with the Development Services Department, and we don't know if it was from input from, community members. We haven't spent too much time, so we don't even know what we would recommend to council right now.
So,
ahead.
Can they actually build if keeping those things overhead the way they are now?
So through the site, they would have to remove those poles and then bring a power feed from Lakeshore up to the site to service for construction. But ultimately, the service for the site would come from Highway 97 down to the site, and it would need to be upgraded accordingly.
But
to
would they,
But could those buildings exist with those power lines as they are now?
I don't believe they could. They would
So-
impact the south
So
side
how
of
could
the
it
lot.
possibly be amenity contribution?
No,
They have to move them anyway.
No, so that's, you're talking about the construction electrical, so that's that component. The proposed amenity was then looking beyond the site, from the site to Lakeshore, and an additional string of 5 poles that were off-site that they were proposing to put underground as part of that work as well.
so Chris, to be clear, those 5 poles after
Yes.
the construction was finished,
Yes.
if they didn't do this, could remain as they are right now without being changed and still service the site. The site could still be serviced with those 5 poles remaining.
Yes.
There, yes.
Okay, and where are those 5 poles?
Between the site and Lakeshore.
Okay, so they go down through
Down the hill
Gully
towards
there?
Lakeshore. They extend down the edge of Latimer where it turns into Gillespie, but they continue directly down the slope towards Lakeshore Drive.
Okay. yeah,
Wouldn't it be
thanks.
considered preferable to go underground, though? Just thinking of visual impact.
Well, for visual impact, that no doubt is the reason that when they originally put it out there, that they were probably thinking.
And I'd
visual.
love to see all the poles in the municipality go underground, quite frankly.
But again, we wanted to say what was out there at the beginning. To be fair to the developer, there has been no more conversation yet, because we wanted to talk about this. They haven't said this is what, for what we know, it might have been suggested to them. I don't know. So there's no, we're just saying what was there right now.
Just thinking, sort of in reference to Mr. Mayor's comment, if it cost an exorbitant amount of money to put power underground, like say $200,000, we would maybe want to suggest that $200,000 is better spent elsewhere. If it was only an extra $10,000, then it would seem like real value, right?
It's kind of along the lines of our conversation
Yeah.
today.
And we don't really know those numbers or anything, you know.
then as far as the DCC goes,
So, as was noted when we had at our beginning with the DCCs, so the legislation specifies what types of utilities you can have DCC charges for. They're roads, sewage, water, drainage, and parkland. So electrical is not a part of that, so we can't have a DCC, a specific DCC for our electrical utility, which is why you see that there.
but you could ultimately, again, thinking about the future for council, basically an equivalent to a DCC bylaw would be the capital reserve for the electrical. Once the asset management project is finished and you know what we should be investing in our electrical infrastructure every year, we should be finding some mechanism to fund it. So we could implement over time a bylaw that says every development needs to pay this much towards the electrical utility, and it's just not a formal DCC province-approved bylaw.
So if the past future, had looked at the future differently, we could have already had that in place, but we don't. But we could do it ourselves.
We could, yes.
Work
But then
towards
again,
it.
as they said here, there is no other costs as such. The direct offsite works, the developers are gonna pay for those to upgrade the electrical service to come in. Where this one is a little silent, and it needs to be said, is that we purchase our power wholesale from Fortis for our electrical utility. Fortis owns the substations. That's the main reason that there's no capital cost here. When we reach 95% of our substation capacity, Fortis is responsible for upgrading the substation. This is a very large application. It is going to have effects on our electrical capacity, and if it doesn't push it over 95, it's going to take it closer, much closer than it is now. So you could argue, on one hand, that, well, that's a Fortis cost because they have to put the money out to do the upgrade. But anybody knows in business that when Fortis goes to the Utility Commission every year to set their rates for power purchase, the rates include their capital plan. The Summerland, so we're paying, this year, for example, Grand Forks is getting a new substation for their municipal electrical utility. Last year, probably New Westminster got, BC Hydro, but whoever else got one, we all pay those rates. It's all part of a much, much larger budget. But to say that we don't pay for the upgrade that wouldn't be a fair statement, because it's somewhere along the line you do pay for it, but it's in the wholesale power purchase price.
Does Fortis tell us when it's 95%, or do we determine when it's 95%?
We've just had a meeting last week actually looking at all the forecasts. It's a formula between looking at the developments that are proposed, all of the 6 unit subdivisions, all these different things. We look at it and we project out, because they need a long lead time. They need, 2 years planning lead time to do this. So it's, sometimes we say this, that, they know that we tend to want to get to the 95. We want to get that upgraded, and even with not considering this at all, we want them to be proactive and get moving on the upgrades. But they will look at our list and say, are you sure that you're not speculating? Are you, prove to us that these are really truly on the horizon? So there's a little bit of or quite a bit of give and take like that.
Okay, that's great for understanding. Thank you.
My next question is not specifically related to how we have electricity in Summerland now with Fortis. I'm wondering that, given that we are looking at a significant solar farm, and we have our own electrical utility here, I understand that the province, or I guess the legislation, does not allow us to have a DCC, a cost charge for the electrical utility. Would there be some way, when we're looking at, and I know that has nothing to do with this particular development, but I'm wondering if there might be some way to include the requirement, at least for some kind of at the very least, for some kind of study, or for a facility like this that has a significant roof space, to require them to have some kind of alternative energy as part of the development. Is that something that we can do legislatively, or is it beyond our purview?
There's a couple of different ways to answer that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so at this point, we don't have it within our OCP, an amenity that's established. We haven't established some form of a formula to ensure that that's fair and equitable across the board.
Okay, so that would
so
be an OCP
It would be a, but it's
discussion?
not just about that, it would be,
No.
it would be more
Oh.
than that component, so.
Go ahead.
Okay. There's provisions within the new building bylaws to include energy components and so forth.
Okay.
So you can actually begin to look at how you're going to make buildings more energy efficient over time. So there's a number of different ways that that can be formulated into. And generally, the guides are not to be necessarily as prescriptive as specifically stating solar on the roof kind of concept.
Yeah, that was just an
More
example for
about-
this one.
Yeah, and it's a good example,
Green
but
initiatives.
more about how to make buildings more green and green initiatives, and setting goals and targets for energy. And then, because not every building is going to have the same model to
Right.
meet that, and not every
Right.
use is going to follow the same format that's conducive with a different conservation or a different generation model.
And that's some of the work that Tammy Rothery's doing
Yeah.
for us, is looking at what can we do, what legislative tools do we have to implement requirements like that, and then it becomes a conversation for council. Again, it's a philosophical.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about our overall power network. How would this development affect our peak times when the whole town uses more power? Say in the winter or in the summer when it's hotter or colder, would it have an impact at all?
Well, the whole capacity of the substation is based on those kind of calculations, so there would be no negative effects other than in the calculation of when we get to the 95% needing to upgrade the
Substation.
substation.
Do we have a figure of what we're at now?
I know what you mean.
Well, that's what we were meeting on the other day, and it's the load forecast. There's work to be done, so no. But we're looking at potentially of getting there in 2 or 3 years with a number of things that are on the
On the
radar, but we
radar.
had to look at how realistic they were.
Right.
So it's really we have an engineering firm working on that with our electrical team.
Good.
Just following up Councillor Trainor's question, I'd like to know what effect will it have on our peak demand and the wholesale price that we pay for electricity based on that demand, on that price? So will it increase the price that we have to pay for electricity?
I do not believe that it will increase the price, that it's not based, because we're buying more power, that our contract isn't based on that, but that I'll have to verify, and we can include that in the report. I can confirm that and put it in the report next council meeting.
Thanks.
So that is, do you have more? Those are the infrastructure sort of components of the impact.
I think I missed something. When Councillor Trainer asked the question about if it will impact peak, yeah. Do we know? I'm not sure if I heard that answer.
It wouldn't have any impact on the capacity for everybody to have power coming to your house. It wouldn't impact that, because the peak, all the projections and everything that's made are based on that peak demand for that reason.
Yeah.
So that when they're looking at your 95% or whatever, or capacity, it's based on that number anyway. So of course, it's going to be a higher peak, but it's going to be,
Okay.
there's no real impact that way. you're gonna have extra revenues, you're gonna have extra costs, but theoretically, that should
Balance
itself
out. Okay, thanks.
Question around the roads. I know that some of the questions from the community have been the safety on Solly Road. So would we be looking at sight lines or where the crosswalks are or whatever, those kind of things when we look at improvements?
Yeah, definitely. That would be at the detailed design stage. That's what we would be looking at, trying to improve the constraints and the conditions that are there existing.
Another question on roads. So we talked mainly about Solly, but we didn't talk much about Latimer. And so with those 2,000 extra vehicles, would that presumably also be 2,000 extra vehicles on Latimer? And what?
Correct.
And so what, do we know what the traffic count on Latimer is now?
There hasn't been an existing count, but it only services a handful of residents currently, so it would be a lot less than the existing on Solly.
Okay. And for community amenities, so you haven't spoken to the developer about community amenities since that first report, is that correct? Because they were talking about having the second water intake as an amenity, and now is that now off the table and the staircases and the sidewalks are back on, or was that just them talking and you haven't?
So when we came to council in February, we essentially had asked council to consider looking at all these components in more detail and doing the study work that's been done to date to really explore and look at what other amenity options are out there, because we didn't really have data at that point to tell us our sewer system status or our road system status beyond the pedestrian or the lack of pedestrian connectivity in the area. So that's the process that we've gone through. So yes, they've been a part of that process. This has been ongoing with our reporting to council. So different components are brought through, but there hasn't been any further negotiation on what the amenity contribution would be. There's been lots of just proposals based on what council has brought forward. So particularly on the fish hatchery, that component was identified in a resolution from council as being one that council wished to explore, and we had further discussion on that. And then on Monday's council meeting, we've moved forward with the third-party review of the data. So we will report back to council with that third-party review on that particular component. So of course, yes, there's been discussion. Those discussions have been reported back to council, but it's not at a point, we're now getting to a point where we're looking at negotiating the actual amenities if this was to go forward.
Okay, thanks.
So we have, so council could either have more discussion tonight or ask more questions, or you can certainly debate it once it comes in a report form if you want to be giving any, you can provide direction for council, to staff, you can,
I just, thank you, CEO. I think, given the framework that you presented with us tonight gives, and you've had some responses and questions, sort of a learning process about amenities, DCCs, and where they apply and where they don't, so on and so forth. And I think it looks to me that you're probably in a position just to move forward with a report to us that reflects what you've been asked tonight.
and that's, we thought that we needed this workshop because
Yeah.
there was a lot of that sort of understanding how the three pieces work, or all those pieces work, before we can put a report forward.
I wouldn't be at all surprised that I, for example, might need clarification as we go down the road, because, it is a little bit difficult to hold all these differences of opportunities, say, between amenities, direct off-site, et cetera, Although I think you've been quite clear in some of the definitions, it's also clear to me that there's, where it becomes more difficult, I think, as Councillor Barco was alluding to, that, when you've got a use pattern in place, there's a negotiation that takes place to sort of move forward on things. But have you got enough now to sort of move towards your report back for us in 2 weeks?
Well, certainly, we can put something together, because I would expect at that time, council would
Yeah,
have further
I'd
conversation.
like to have a couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Go ahead, sure, by all means.
I'm wondering,
Do you-
it hasn't been identified in what you said, but is there any consideration for any changes or upgrades on Gillespie or McDonald or the outlet on Solly as it goes down towards Lake Shore? Does this kind of infilling predict any changes in those roadways?
So in the report, there's, what they need to do is assume where that generated traffic from the site is likely to travel. And so based on the volume or the percentage split that they've looked at, the majority of the traffic is projected to go down, come from the highway down Solly to Latimer and back out that same way. So there is a small percentage that is assumed to make its way either further down Solly, like up to Latimer, further down Solly back to Lakeshore, or through Gillespie to Lakeshore, but not a significant portion that would, not in the volumes that we're seeing of the 2,000 that would impact that roadway significantly.
Can I just?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Just a quick comment on that. I think anybody who lives in that area can tell you that if you're going to Penticton, you're going down Solly. If you're going into town, you're going up Solly. It's going to have an impact on both ends of Solly.
So my question was, who decided where that traffic how was that model decided on?
So in the report, they make an assumption based on what they've seen for traffic volumes, and then that was reviewed, third-party review, and then as part of staff's review to I guess, to see if it made sense on what they were assuming.
I suggest that there may be some differences to what the assumption is as to what the practice might be, but.
What about, if there's going to be, changes, obviously upgrades to Solly, I guess the suggestion is that approaches from Solly or whatever off of Gillespie and other roads that are intersecting with Solly, those would have to meet standards for curves or the access visibility lines and so on and so forth? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's not as though you put the road down and leave everything else the way it is.
Right.
You have to make sure that the access to those additional roads are suitable to meet the standard that you've got on Solly, for example.
Yeah, you'd be tying in that new
Yeah.
roadway to those adjoining ones
Yeah,
as well.
okay, thanks. Go ahead, don't wait for me.
Thank you. My question relates to the roads as well. I think I have this right. When we were talking about not the direct off-site works, but the 1.2 million to get the estimate to get Solly to 8.6 meters and the 600,000 to get Latimer upgraded to the 8.6. Is it? And maybe this isn't the time to be asking this question, but I won't know until I ask it. Is it reasonable to expect the developer to pay the total amount for the Latimer upgrade? Because if the development was not proposed for that, there would be no need to change Latimer?
That is certainly an argument that a councillor could have and anybody could have. That's one of the arguments. Another argument could be that the road is not in the shape that it should be for the current volume, and so there should have been some upgrading. And I want to be clear. It's important because it's important for future developments. If council feels here that the developer should bear the responsibility to upgrade the road 100% responsible on a road that's not to where it should be right now. People can use it and it's fine, but it's not where it should be. They should carry that principle through to another development that may be, in their opinion, more palatable or more. And that's all that I'm suggesting in this, is that whatever principles you apply, because there's no right ones or wrong ones, whatever principles you apply, you should apply when you're looking at another development at another time in another location.
Right.
And I think in some municipalities you can use past principles. It's difficult here because we haven't asked for too many of the roads leading in upgrades in the past. So if you were using that principle, they may, but we also haven't had too many of this magnitude. So those are all things as individual counselors you need to keep in your mind.
Yeah,
It would seem to
when we
me
discuss
that,
that.
it seemed to me that, with a minimum, I would say there's really a minimum amount of traffic on Latimer now. As somebody pointed out, there's
Just a
only a few
handful.
residences there. This becomes a major component of the access to any development. So it seemed to me that the Latimer would have to be upgraded completely in terms of meeting the traffic demands that would be on it. All the, safety aspects, sidewalks, it would have to be dramatically improved from now because you've just got a few residential people using it right now.
But the question would be
as
who would pay for it?
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, they would pay for
Right.
it.
If I may, I haven't lived here long enough, but certainly hearsay would say to me that people understood whatever the development was that was going to be Summerland Hills and the golf course, that there was to have been a contribution from the developer on the road that would be, on the roads that would be
Used to access.
accessing, and therefore that principle had been supposed in the past.
It never materialized, though.
It doesn't matter. I mean, the discussion was there, is what my understanding was.
Right,
May
but there
not
wasn't,
materialize.
it wasn't voted on, so it's good to have those discussions.
I guess when you look at the principle, it's part of the discussion till the point you come where your trigger works or it doesn't work.
And I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind that some contribution towards roads upgrades has to happen when you have a DCC bylaw that's not complete like ours. But the big question in the council is going to be that scale.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anybody else? You can?
I have one
Go
other
ahead.
question. We've talked about the DCC charges for the water, sewer, stormwater, and roads. I'm wondering if there will be any discussion on a parks amenity contribution. It'll just be the standard 5%, or
So
is there?
there isn't in the Parks Master Plan a park identified in this particular area, so the contributions would come through the DCC charges, the charges available. So similar to other developments where it's not actually identified
Yes.
within the planning for a
Oh,
park in
thank
that
you.
area.
Yeah, I
So
didn't
you
write
collect the
that down.
DCCs, and those would be utilized for purchasing or augmenting park in either existing park or identified locations for parks within the plan.
So,
And as
sorry.
we discussed around Nixon, the Nixon subdivision, council
Right.
can revisit that, but revisit that through the parks plan and the OCP
Okay.
to identify those locations.
So I'm sorry, I didn't get the chance to write down that. So it does show about 400,000 for the parks DCC.
So that would be the DCC that would be collected for parks. But as the DCC bylaw does not identify park space or in that area.
It
that's-
goes into general.
Right. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if, at some point, we would be able to get a kind of a bottom line cost to the district, or is that just too complicated to figure out?
Well, certainly in the report that comes to council next week, there will be more, these numbers, a lot of numbers here, and there'll be more summarizing of actual numbers. I think it's again, it's a little philosophical to take the costs, and we talked, David's gonna do some more work with some of the expected revenues combined with the expected costs. Of course, the costs are generally capital costs, and the revenues are generally ongoing annual costs, so you have to do some calculations. But that's our intent, to try to do some more work. But I know from being in finance for as many years as I want, you can pretty much, on a one like this, you can pretty much show the story in many different ways, depending on which way, and each one of them can be real and fair in its own way. And that's the problem with, you could strongly argue here that the contributions of $3 million in DCC's $1.5 million in direct offsite works and $1.5 million in contributions, along with the increased electrical revenues in water and sewer, were pretty strong monies in, and that we've already talked about the monies out, and that the actual impact on the operation might be minimal, but you could just as strongly argue the other side of the conversation. So there is a little, to summarize it too tightly is a really difficult thing to do, but we are gonna look and see if in the best way of presenting the picture in where all the main numbers are kind of at least together, so that you can see it in a way that's easier to digest. That's
Yep.
just to be able to have it truly all out there in a way to digest would be our goal to look at.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You know, as they say, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics or something like that, right? But I appreciate it's almost an impossible task to quantify some of this stuff. But another thing I would, if you know, just like to know is how you quantify staff time, and how much staff time has been put in and will have to be put into it. You know. So.
That's part of what people get paid to do, is their staff time in any project.
Okay, but if they weren't doing one thing, they could be doing another thing.
Well,
But
that's true.
it just,
I think the one, just a minute, Councilor Barkle, the other thing is that, I mean, what I see here relative to water, sewer, et cetera, those are fairly, I mean, they're obviously calculated, and there's quite specific numbers. Where you run into not difficulties, but in coming up with a finite number is when you're talking about areas that require negotiation. At this point, you're not there on any negotiations, because you've got, with respect to amenities or whatever, some of those things have yet to be negotiated based on some of the stuff that's taking place now. Is that correct? I mean, you can't come up with next week with a firm number on stuff that's yet to be negotiated.
Right, but we can talk about
Yes.
what we've talking about as far as what their thoughts are,
Yeah,
as far
yeah.
as where their limits on contributions would be.
Did you?
yeah, I was just, Councillor Holmes brought up an interesting point. When I was at an RDOS meeting, they had a $30 million project that was approved. The building permit fees on that were huge, and the discussion was, well, you know, really, is it really fair to take this $500,000 in building permit fees from this large construction project when our costs were so much less? If this project was approved, our building permit fees would probably be phenomenally higher than what our actual costs are. So there's no real answer. That's another one of those things.
But just to be clear, the legislation requires that your fees for building inspection fees are related to the actual cost. And although they may seem phenomenal, I'd say that there's not too many building projects that you can do that if you were to truly include all the time that it costs you, that you actually make money off of them. Very, very rarely, because it takes.
They're to pay for
it's-
those
Yeah.
time.
Big projects like this infiltrate in the entire organization, and, you know, you have five of your senior managers here tonight, and how many more meetings, so it's a fair statement that it does cost, but that's why those fees are there as well, to offset it.
And we are the corporation is a business that runs a business. We're a service industry for our community, and we look after the business that comes to us.
So, Council, how are we doing? We're 2 hours in, and I think we've had a pretty good
I
go of
think I
things.
need
Councilor
to,
Carlson,
I think
you
I
okay?
need to go home
Okay.
shortly, so just.
Okay, I think we've had a pretty good go. You have two more questions?
Two more questions.
Okay, can we keep them, I'm thinking of the amount of time we've had and so on, so try to keep them brief.
Is there any way to estimate or quantify the costs to the district of operations and maintenance down the road, like annually, or is there a way of doing that?
Well, we'll certainly put some thought into that, into the report, because in some cases, there's, you know, certainly impacts operationally on the amount of water that gets treated at the water treatment plant, or, and in other cases, the increase in another system might not have a annual effect. So, but we will talk about operations, because you should never talk about capital projects unless you talk about the operational costs that go with it.
After the
So,
fact.
that's-
That was one
I
question.
tell you, Counselor, that's an interesting statement, because I can remember when we did our water treatment plant, we asked constantly for operational costs, and we never got them. So I'm pleased to hear that it's something that'll be considered properly.
Yeah, I'd like
Go ahead.
to hear that. The other thing is, when our next meeting, I think, is
2 weeks from this Monday.
14th?
10 days.
It's close, it's coming up. 2 weeks from last Monday.
No, 3 weeks.
No, it isn't. It's 3
3
weeks.
Oh, yeah, we
3
got
weeks.
next week.
Because it's the second, it's just after the,
Whatever.
it's the,
November 12th.
it's the 14th.
It's a Wednesday.
Doesn't matter when it is. What are you speaking about?
Why are you
I just meant-
talking to me like
I
that?
just meant,
Go ahead.
just meant
Smith,
you're
make-
My goodness.
referring to when it would come up? When the next discussion would come up?
The date is cogent to my question.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. So our next meeting being November the 14th, I believe, we will be getting a report from council based on the questions and, sorry?
From staff.
From staff, yeah, not from us. From staff, based on the questions that we've had and
Summarizing what.
is summarizing what our discussion has been.
Yeah.
Will that report be another thing that we receive for information? Because I'm just wondering a little bit about the timing, and I have no idea, but the timing of the fish hatchery, not the fish hatchery review, but the review,
Third-party
that
review.
third-party review, thank you, in terms of the solution that Lark is proposing and the report that's been written. So I'm just wondering about the timing. Will this just be coming for
Information.
information, and when might we expect that review? I
Right,
don't
so
know.
I'll let Dean answer the question about the timing for the fish hatchery, but as
Okay.
far as whether or not it's information, that's really council's choice. It will come as information, but there's lots to it, and there's lots of pieces, especially in the contributions and the responsibilities, or whether or not you think something should be considered a mandatory off-site work, and so it could be more, council could direct us to go away and do more on something, or that you don't have enough information in a particular place. So it's information, but you certainly, it doesn't have to be just quiet until some big time in the future. There could be outcomes and further direction to us. And then as far as the timing of the fish hatchery report,
So we send the information off to the third-party engineer. They'll provide a timeline based on that data. So based on the information, the initial review, they'll provide a schedule. So I haven't yet received a schedule from them, but we hope it'll be in line with this timeline, but we don't know at this point. They may need
Okay,
to-
so before Christmas, though, you think you'll have the results of the third-party
I certainly
review?
hope so, yes.
Okay, good, thank you, that answers my question.
Okay, are we good? Could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you. Seconded, carried. I'd really like to thank staff for the reports. I'd also like to thank the public, one, for being here, and for really listening attentively. I think it was really a good learning exercise for us, not just for this development, but for everything that is going on and may go on in the community. It's a very illuminating thing that I think staff has done. And in my almost 10 years of being on council, I haven't seen this kind of depth given to a subject to bring both the public and council up to speed on what all this stuff means. So I'm very appreciative of staff and the effort that they put into this evening. So thank you, staff.